Hello, welcome to Road to the F1. I'm Paul Anderson. So in this series, we are meeting people online, we're reviewing their cars, and we're expanding our social media reach with the goal of eventually getting to the McLaren F1. So a huge thank you goes out to Sean. He reached out to me back in December, long before the world went to hell. And today we've got his car. If you've got something interesting you'd like to see on the show, feel free to send me a DM or fire off an email to roadtothef1@gmail.com. Now, 1997 was a heck of a year. The British music scene had reached its peak with huge releases by Oasis and The Verve and Radiohead. Princess Diana died in a car crash. Some important things probably also happened in North America. To be honest, I wasn't paying attention. I was 18 years old, I was obsessed with Oasis, and I was busy drifting golf carts around the basement of a clubhouse at an upscale golf course in Calgary. I was dreaming about the McLaren F1, the Dodge Viper GTS, and this car, the Acura NSX. This is an absolute dream come true today. Now, when the NSX first came out in 1990, the influence that it had on the supercar and sports car world really can't be understated. All the big boys, Ferrari, Lamborghini, Porsche, they all had to sit up and take notice and realize that they couldn't just rely on their name anymore. And importantly, in the context of this show, it actually played a very important part in the development of the McLaren F1. Gordon Murray himself has said that after he first drove the NSX, it immediately became the benchmark that he wanted to hit for ride quality and handling in the F1. Gordon Murray actually owned an NSX, and it was basically his daily driver. He put on 70,000 miles over the years on his car. Now, the handling and the ride quality is achieved largely by two things. First off, there was the world's first all-aluminum monocoque, which was made very, very stiff, especially after Ayrton Senna drove an earlier version, and he called the car fragile. Or, if you know your Christmas movie references, fragile. So they went back to the drawing board and they made it 50% stiffer than what they originally had. And the second thing is a groundbreaking use of an all-aluminum suspension system that had a unique compliance pivot. Now, on a standard road car, your suspension system really only goes up and down. What the compliance pivot does is it allows the suspension to move slightly forward and back as well. So ultimately, if you're going hard cornering, you hit a bump, your steering is going to end up being compromised. What the compliance pivot does is it allows the tires to maintain their toe angle, basically, leaving you with undisturbed steering. So with that rigid chassis and the all-aluminum suspension, you can really feel how that makes a difference. Taking it through the corners, it's really quite something. You can actually feel how stiff the chassis is. The suspension is stiff, but it's not overly stiff like a lot of sports cars can be. And I can easily see how this would be considered a daily driving sports car. And driving around in this car right now, it's very interesting to think that this may be the closest I ever get to driving a McLaren F1 and knowing what it feels like. This is an absolute pleasure to drive. Going around the corners just feels fantastic. The handling is wonderful. This is great. There's really not a lot of body roll. This is just fantastic. So this is the 97 model year, which is the first year that the NSX received a few upgrades. There weren't a lot, but they were very important. Largely it was done to the drivetrain. The 24-valve VTEC V6 had a displacement increase from 3 liters up to 3.2, and they added a 6th gear to the manual gearbox. If you opted for the automatic transmission, Honda stuck you with the old one. They probably gave people a look saying, you have more money than you have sense and you don't deserve the new engine, so we're going to stick you with some of the old stock we have of the old engine. So with the new displacement, that gave a power increase of 290 horsepower and 220 pounds-feet of torque at 7,100 RPM. And a 0 to 60 time of around 5 seconds. Now, nowadays 5 seconds is really not that impressive, to be honest, but back in the 90s, anything under 5 seconds was pretty rare. At 290 horsepower, admittedly, that's not really a lot of power. And I'm going to say something controversial here, but in all honesty, do you actually need more? I'm sure they could have thrown a 500 horsepower engine into this, but that's not really what this car was designed for. This was designed to be a daily driven, high-end sports car. And with 290 horsepower, you can maximize your fun and capabilities of the car and not leave anything on the table. And other than that, honestly, they didn't really change too much. The brakes changed a little bit, but other than that, the car was largely left untouched. And from the exterior, they didn't change the design at all. And quite frankly, you can't really blame them. With a car like this, the design is fantastic. It's so clean, it's elegant, it's very simple. If you were to ask an average person that doesn't really know anything about cars, there's no way that they would know that this is a design that would have been originally conceived back in the late 80s. It's just that timeless. I absolutely love the front end of this. It's boxy and curvy in all the right ways. The long, slender side pods, the extended overhang over the back tires giving the NSX a usable trunk space. The trunk was actually designed to fit 2 sets of golf clubs, which you're not going to see in a lot of high-end sports cars. The minimalist rear wing, the fighter jet inspired cockpit, everything about this car is absolutely beautiful. And we also can't forget those pop-up headlights. They're personally my favorite pop-ups of all time. Now, considering this car came out in the 90s, other than maybe just the tape deck, this is still actually a quite modern interior. Throw a ridiculous touchscreen up here on the top and bingo bongo, you've got yourself a modern car. You can tell a lot of time and thought went into the ergonomics and the design of this interior. Everything is easily within reach. It's a really nice layout. There's simple little things like the offset of the window buttons for up and down. The AC vent controls located on the door, which I've never seen before in any other car. The gauge cluster is simple and clean and elegant. The gear shifter feels fantastic. The throws are really short, there's tons of feel. The clutch is a little heavy, not too light. The steering, compared to an average road car, you do have to turn the wheel a little bit more to get it going where you want it to go, which is a bit strange on some of the sharper turns. I'm really kind of full opposite lock for my hands. But I suppose if you're really pushing this car, you're going to want that extra play so you can make little micro adjustments as you're going around the corners. I really, really like the way this handles. Now, this is my first time driving a mid-engined two-seater, and I've got to say, it's a completely different sensation from what I'm used to. Having the engine right behind your head, all the vibration, all the noises happening right back there, which is completely crazy. Without the long hood in front, you can really see the road. So that's it. The 1997 Acura NSX. Driving this has been an absolute dream come true, so a huge, huge thank you to Sean for lending me the keys for the day and taking his car for a spin. If you want, you can follow him on Instagram at nsx_guy. So on my scale of 1 to F1, which is completely arbitrary to be honest, the NSX gets a hefty 7. It was hugely important in the development of the F1 itself, and if they did give this car more power, it would have been even closer. So that's it. That's the show. Now, if you don't mind me, I'm going to drive around. I've got some old school Weezer going, and I'm going to pretend that I'm drifting a golf cart around the basement of a clubhouse. We'll see you on the next show.